Hello, my name is Parker, and I don't usually do tutorials. I'm sure I would like to in the future when I find time. But I was a bit proud of myself for finding a way to convert the Pokemon Scarlet typeface, at least like the graphic appearance of it, the styling of it, into a graphic style that could be applied to any other live type. And so I wanted to run through it real quick in case anyone was curious, because that is stuff that I am curious about. I look at something and I wonder, how do I make that live? How do I make that non-destructive? Anyways, we're gonna go through it layer by layer in the appearance panel. And this is Adobe Illustrator 2023. For anyone that's curious, I'm sure you can apply these same methods if you're given the capabilities and other software. But for this instance, we're going to be using Adobe Illustrator. So the typeface is going to be Ortum MN. I don't really know what that stands for, and I'm not sure if the place I got it from allows for commercial usage. I doubt it, considering Pokemon, you know, Nintendo company probably bought rights. I don't know, but it's fine. We're not going to be using it commercially anyways, so we can screw around with it. So starting from the base, obviously this is live type, as you can see. I've set the font to be the same as the one in the logo, and we're going to be going through the different layers. And keep in mind, we are not going to be using masks. I mean, you can see right here that there are no, I mean, you can't have masks in an appearance panel as far as I'm aware, so yeah, that's why it looks like it's magic. But moving onwards. So first, let's get rid of this fill. Oop. So obviously we don't see the type now. We're gonna take a closer look on here and see if you can kind of connect what parts of the logo fits to right here. We know that there's a triangle pattern that goes up to the top. It looks like it converts into like a downwards pattern as it gets closer to the top. But if you notice, and the easiest way of thinking about this, when it, you know, in terms of building it out, we have to look at it in the most simple form possible. So we see a gradient from the sort of dark maroon kind of red up to what you think might be an orange, but this is an upward arrow. This is a downward arrow. So actually this dark maroon red goes up to a bright yellow. And the pattern behind it is an always upwards facing triangle. And it looks like it has a gradient from the sort of really kind of unsaturated or not much contrast maroon into this brighter orange. And now, of course, with a pattern, you can't really apply a gradient to it, right? You can't apply an overarching gradient across a pattern without expanding it. So, how did we manage to accomplish this? Well, the magic comes with opacity gradients and blending modes. First, we'll start off with we'll take that gradient that we were talking about, the sort of dark maroon red to this brighter yellow, because we can see those downward arrows. Oh my lord, those downward arrows kind of go up into the yellow downward arrows. And what we do afterwards, we see on the logo there is a bright yellow stroke around the backside. Now occasionally I use strokes and occasionally I use offset fills. So in this case I use an offset fill. And then there is also another very thin brown stroke that goes around the edge. So I used a brown stroke. Almost there. This is very simple, kind of boring. So now we're going to get to the more important part, and the design aspect that makes this type logo stand out. So we have our pattern here, which is the offset kind of like brick triangle pattern, made from what I took is the color at the very bottom of the logo, this color right here. Now as we can see right here, it's the same color across the board. It goes up to the top. It does not look like the final logo. And what we want to do essentially is change the color of the triangles towards the top without changing the color of the triangles towards the bottom of the pattern. And the way to do that is, like I mentioned before, using opacity gradients and blending modes. And so if we go ahead and apply our first opacity gradient and blending mode, it's going to be 16% overlay. I couldn't really tell you why I chose this combination. I kind of finagled with all these different values, and so I got something that matched the color of the original logo. So we're going to apply this one right now. It's very, very difficult to see, but if you look at the very top, you can see that triangle barely changing color. You almost really can. I mean, even I really couldn't. I'm not sure if I need that, but it might make a difference once we turn on the other layers. So we're going to turn on this overlay layer. It's going to give it a bit more kind of burn, brighten things up, saturate them a little tiny bit. And then we're going to turn on this 100% soft light layer. Now you can see the difference. So it's really starting to get that saturation and that contrast and burning in those, I guess like those oranges or those reds or whatnot. And if you press G to get to your gradient tool, whoopsie doo. Oh, here it is. So funny enough, these colors that we have right here, I basically just took the gradient that we had behind it, and I just made the red towards the bottom. Actually, no. What did I do? I think I took the orange. I took the orange from the original logo towards the top, the color that I wanted it to be, and then the red at the bottom of our normal gradient, because we wanted to keep the bottom, right? We wanted to keep that bottom color. So I made the opacity on this gradient node 0, and I kept the orange at 100, because that's the area that we want to affect with our blending mode. So that's essentially the method that we use for a lot of these different blending mode layers and opacity gradients. So moving forward, just keep that in mind. When it comes to this one, the overlay, maybe it's a bit different. What is different about this one? I couldn't tell you. Oh, you know what it does? I think I actually changed the color of the triangles towards the bottom. Let's see. I did. Okay, so if you pay attention, towards the bottom, it brightens those reds up a little bit. It actually kind of brightens and burns everything a little bit more towards the bottom. So, gomen. I misspoke earlier. And so moving onwards, we're basically doubling that soft light layer to really get that burn in, to really brighten up those yellows towards the top. And so now you can see there's a pretty significant difference between the upwards triangle pattern towards the bottom, which is still the sort of dark maroon, and then towards the top is getting into that kind of like burned orange, more like a darker red kind of brown color. But as we can see, it's really orange up here on the main logo. Meanwhile, our upwards arrows are more or less kind of a dark red. We've saturated it and maybe shifted the hue a little bit, but we haven't really gotten it where it needs to be. So what we're going to do is add a screen layer, which brightens it up. And I'm pretty sure all these opacity gradients use the same 2 color nodes. We're only messing with the blending modes. So this makes the biggest difference, as you can see. Screen is really good for just brightening up the color, and that's really all we needed to do. But then there's something a little bit different. Like, this looks pretty good on its own, but you can see there's like this really obvious, I mean, it's not obvious if you miss it, but when you take a closer look, you can see the gradient. Like, there's sort of this really harsh gradient right here, and it almost hides part of the triangles in the middle. And you can tell that when we look at our pattern right now, the triangles are really visible. Meanwhile, when we look at this, it's almost as if they get a little less opaque towards the middle, but become more easily visible towards the top and bottom. And so to solve that, I figured let's just add another opacity gradient and kind of, you know, just have that red that we need, maybe even a little bit of a brighter red, and shove it in the middle. And I'm sure you can be able to see it hides it well. I essentially took the color of the middle of the gradient, and yeah, you can see my nodes right here. Yeah, I took that the color in the middle of the back gradient and overlaid it on top. And then just kind of softened up those triangles in the middle. But you can see that's what we did. We have our background fill, which is just the base gradient. We have our offset fill, which gives that yellow stroke. We have a very thin offset brown stroke, which kind of makes it more contrast with any background color. We have our triangle pattern, our brick triangle pattern that moves up towards the top. And in order to change the colors of the area towards the top of the pattern, we used, looks like 4 different, or technically 3. The first overlay blending mode layer is used to correct the colors towards the bottom. You could probably just fix the pattern color, but I kind of did this on a whim, so. But yes, these top 3 opacity gradients with their blending modes are used to correct the color of the top of the layer. And then in order to reduce the like super blatant contrast of the pattern towards the middle, really bring it all together, we used our gradient, our opacity gradient here at the very top. And so what we can do is do a lot of things actually. Right now I'm using it as a linked layer in a Photoshop file from my thumbnails for my playthrough. And I can change this number to anything I want. Right now there's a space in between the 4, but you know, eventually when I get to number 5, I'll just type 5 and it all looks fine. But you know, being a graphic style and being a live type, we can change it to any other font too. For example, Comic Sans. In the case that you ever want to use Comic Sans, you know, please only do it intentionally as an ironic joke. But yeah, there's that. There's some other ones. I really like Rock Grotesque. Rock Grotesque is a really pretty typeface. There's that. Of course, it doesn't really look. Oh, and the reason I have these rounded edges is because there's some issues with the typeface that I downloaded, and in order to fix them, I had to do rounded edges. So you can do hard corners and like hard lines, but I just have rounded edges, which looks a bit weird here, but whatever. Let's see another one. Acumen wide. It's pretty nice. Like that's really pretty, right? And this is live type. That's the magic of it. Alrighty. Well, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And I hope this helped your, your mind a little bit. Be able to envision all these different crazy type designs and like, how do I make this live type? Because that's the important part. You can watch as many tutorials about arbitrary things as you want, and that does help. But most of it is just exploring the software, looking at art you admire, and wondering, how can I make this? Working backwards is my advice. Working backwards. Taking it step by step. Alrighty. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you another time. Goodbye.